Mr. Turner, please go ahead.
Well, hello. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the Defense and Security Committee. I'm very glad to have everybody coming together today. I want to thank the NATO PA Secretariat, which has made an unbelievable transition in such a difficult time. I've been very excited how well I think we have, as members, have adapted, even though technology has been difficult for all of us to adapt to. I think once we're in and functioning, everybody's doing really well to go through the deliberative process. We can all just log in and make certain that we have the documents that we need. So at that, I'll bring the committee to order and declare our meeting open. Some practical information. Today, we will consider 2 of our committee's 4 draft reports, the other 2 having been presented at our meeting on July 16th. We will do our best to keep this meeting to 2 hours. As you will note from the meeting agenda, the committee's general report on Russian military modernization will be presented first, followed by the DSCTC subcommittee report on the Western Balkans. Each rapporteur will present his report first, and then I will open the floor for further discussion. If you would like to take the floor following the presentation of a report, please click on the Request to Speak button, and you'll be added to the list. You can do so at any time. Should you experience technical difficulties, please make use of the Operator Chat Box tab found on the right-hand side of your screen. Our committee coordinator, Jay Lee, is available to assist you. There is also a hotline you can call for technical support. You can find this number at the top of the chat box to ask Jay Lee if she can provide you with additional assistance. All relevant documents, such as the draft agenda and draft reports, can be found under the Documents button on the right-hand side of your screen. Please also note this meeting will be recorded for the Assembly's communication purposes. Please contact the committee director if you have any concerns or wish to be exempted from this. This event is on the record, and a press release will be published after the meeting. Our first action item will be for the adoption of the agenda. Now, moving to that first item, I ask the committee to take up the draft agenda for these proceedings. Are there any comments or objections to the agenda? Does anyone like to speak about the agenda? And if no one has an objection or a comment concerning the agenda, we will deem the agenda adopted. Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. I would like now to ask Senator Cedric from France to present the draft general report, Russian Military Modernization, Challenges Ahead for NATO Allies. Senator Perrin, the floor is yours. Cedric.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs les membres de la...
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the delegation, dear colleagues. I would like to begin by thanking you for taking part in this meeting. It's a great pleasure to be here with you in order to introduce the draft study on for the Committee on Security and Defense on the modernization of the Russian armed forces and the challenges that it presents to NATO. We are limited by the tools at our disposal on the video conferencing, but I'm convinced that we're going to be able to move forward on this draft report on a topic which is not only at the heart of our alliance, but which is also particularly important for the Euro-Atlantic societies that we represent. While most of us were focused on the tragic growth of the pandemic in April 2020, Russia launched one anti-satellite missile into space. In July, the Russian Cosmos satellite system launched a projectile into orbit. This same system maneuvered near a U.S. satellite at the beginning of the year. The development of anti-satellite warfare and weapons is a clear violation of international treaties on extra-atmospheric space, which requires its signatories, including Russia, to limit exploration of space to purely peaceful means and objectives. The treaty does not ban legitimate defense, and that is probably the basis, that ambiguity is probably the basis for Russia's actions. Without a dialogue, action in space by this measure in space by Russia seems to also threaten civilian activities of allies in space, but also by extension, security interests. It also shows a new Russian propension to twist international law and norms to its advantage and its will to challenge international security. This use of new technologies in new types of armaments in violation of international norms is within the framework of a long list of recent Russian measures, not only through political tightrope with regard to NATO countries, but also the rhetoric of its leaders and the language of its military doctrine, which aims to threaten allies and to affirm Moscow's pretensions to create an alternative international system established compared to this one in existence since the Second World War. It is with the development of medium-range, intermediate range missiles by Russia in violation of the INF Treaty that the United States decided in February 2019 to withdraw for 6 months from this pillar of international arms control. By the same token, Russia's attitude, which for a long time was twisting and applying selectively the Open Skies Treaty, led the United States to announce their intent to withdraw from it. As is underscored in this report, Russia has rigorously modernized its armed forces over the last decade, improving technologies as well as restructuring its forces for increased flexibility of its organization, including in its command and control. This race to modernize has accelerated over the last few years and has been done to the detriment of potential investments that the Russian government could have made to benefit the public sector. Modernizing its military is set out as a political priority in order to achieve parity with NATO forces. In 2018, President Putin unveiled a set of so-called invincible weapons which could circumvent the alliance's missile defense systems. These armament systems contain propulsion systems and a limited range nuclear armament, hypersonic intercontinental cruise missile, a ballistic missile with an air launcher, and an aquatic drone with propulsion and a nuclear warhead. Within these systems, you have, for instance, the supersonic maneuverable avant-garde glider, which can reach Mach 20. Above and beyond the modernization of its strategic nuclear arsenal, in particular by prioritizing intercontinental ballistic missile development, Russia has invested heavily in naval and aerospatial capabilities, for instance, in developing a fighter jet, a cloaked fighter jet, fifth generation one, as well as submarines. Increased mobility, discretion and speed and powerful munitions, as well as precise munitions, have been at the heart of Russia's current military doctrine for the last 10 years. These modernization projects are the result of a revision of the national security strategy and the military doctrine of Russia, which are key documents which see NATO technological capability as an existential threat. These documents reference a security environment in which Russia is faced with two great types of threats. On the one hand, military technology progress, and on the other, non-military, i.e. political, economic, and informational threats. For Russian leaders, NATO and especially the United States are the source of global instability and concrete risk for Russia. Therefore, for Russia, the proper response has been a pan-governmental and pan-societal security approach, which brings together military powers, economic and informational powers, and reinforces resilience of Russian society. The various modernization projects have included an armaments program and this new approach. These can have a major impact on international security and that of allies and partners in particular. These effects are already visible in the field, the effects of Russia showing its strength and its readiness to go against international law. The theater of conflict in Ukraine and in Syria have been training labs for Russia, where it was able to successfully try out its military modernization efforts. In Syria in particular, it was able to test new equipment as well as new air missile launchers, in addition to some other means, such as the Wagner Group, which is partially controlled by the government and which was active in Libya and Sudan. The modernization of Russian armed forces is therefore a real threat to NATO and to allies. The alliance's defense and deterrence and defense posture is based on its nuclear capability as well as its conventional and missile defense capabilities. But the new Russian means and weapons have the ability to counter these capabilities. This is why the Russian threat should push alliance leaders to overcome their political differences and to finally live up to the commitment taken in 2014 to invest at least 2% of their GDP in defense, thereby contributing to the overall resilience of NATO, as well as to invest 20% in investing in innovation, for instance, to improve NATO's mobility, its interoperability, and its firepower. These are all going to play a key part in improving and maintaining NATO's technological edge faced with strategic competitors. Finally, we all have to focus on the possibility that we have to mobilize in order to we have to mobilize all levels of power and of government in order to fight against the constant attempts at interference in our domestic affairs, be it through disinformation campaigns, through attempts at corruption, or through economic pressure. We have to remember the spirit of Article 3 of the Washington Treaty, which states that all allies must act individually and together and collectively in a continuous and effective way for the development of their common means and to help one another in order to maintain and increase their individual and collective resistance to armed attack. We have to fight for maintaining the political military alliance that has been the strongest and most effective in history. That's the end of my report. I'd like to in particular thank Ethan Corbin for his excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric. I appreciate your presentation. It's an excellent report at an incredibly difficult time. We're now going to take comments from the floor. Ethan and Stefan will be coordinating, calling on you, and recognizing you for your comments. We're going to take, because of the technology we're going to take all the comments at once and then have Cedric respond to them after everyone has commented. So I'm going to now turn it over to Ethan to coordinate through the technology that we have, calling on individuals and letting them speak, and then I'll close it out and turn it to Cedric for his comments.
Sure, thank you very much. It looks like our first questioner is Chris Peters, a member of the European Parliament and the head of the European Parliamentary Delegation. Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Chair, and also I would like to congratulate our colleague with this draft report. I think it's a very good report. I have one remark or concern. What is not mentioned in the draft report, when I read it very carefully, of course, is the hybrid threat. What is the reason that this element, a very important element, is not mentioned? And perhaps you have not mentioned that because there was in October 2018 already a report about hybrid threats and updates, but I think it's very important to iterate and to make a reference to that report, or certainly mentioning also the hybrid challenges and threats that is coming from Russia. Thank you.
Est-ce que je dois répondre tout de suite ou je réponds à la fin?
Non, on va prendre toutes les questions en même temps.
Right away? No, we'll take all the questions at the same time.
The next questioner will be Alex Shelbrook, the head of the UK delegation.
I have a couple of questions, and the answers will lead on, and then a couple of perhaps controversial observations. In terms of Russia's missile capability, do we have any information on how it's being targeted? I.e., can we make the assumption that in any hot war they would take out the infrastructure, transport infrastructure, such as bridges, main railway lines, etc.? And therefore, does that need NATO to make a complete reassessment of tank warfare and tank capability. This is a bit of a live issue in the UK at the moment. We're coming up to the Strategic Defence Review. There has been a rumour in the press that tank capability is going to be drawn back, and I think that's something that Parliamentary Assembly may need to think about. And it leads on, of course, to that question, what can NATO do to counteract the missile threat that exists? And have we made an assessment of, leading on from the hybrid warfare question, and under the guise of support as to whether Russia may be about to deploy some of these missile capabilities in Belarus, which would obviously bring new areas into play. And just to draw on, and I say this controversially, but I do think this is important and must be addressed and assessed as we move forward. So you made the very important point that all NATO allies must move towards the 2% and 20% of GDP. But with the advent of PESCO and the European Defence Fund, there will be allies who will want to class their defence contribution as part of that fund. And that fund is not going to be able to enable NATO capability, especially with the closed shop of PESCO, in the way that NATO currently operates. So the Parliamentary Assembly needs to give this consideration because there is an issue on the horizon that is going to diminish the 2% capability. So I'll leave that one there.
Next questioner. Thank you very much, Mr. Shelbrook. Our next questioner will be Ahmet Yildiz from Turkey. Please bring him up.
He meant actually Rick Larson. That's what I understand. It was a bit...
Sorry, we're having a tiny delay here.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
There he is.
Hello, Ethan. Chairman, greetings from my home city, electoral district. I hope someday we can do our meetings in my hometown. First of all, I thank the rapporteur, Cedric. Really, these days, we need such reports, evaluations on many things, but especially on the nature of Russian activities, Russian threat. Yesterday, I had attended also the political committee meeting. I had raised some criticism about NATO-EU relationship. I won't repeat it here. But the essence of this criticism, and today, what I will say today, is that way. Of course, the Russian intervention, invasion in Ukraine and in Syria has been 5 years in Ukraine, or more, 6 years, 5 years in Syria. Now it is enough to draw some lessons. The report is about modernization of weapons, yes, about the Russian arsenal, about their strategic objectives and their way of use, but also about how the alliance can counter Russia, either through arms race or through political coherence, strengthening the political coherence among allies. I hope our rapporteur could have the opportunity to get some briefing information from either Secretary General or NAC on this. If the allies, the executive guys are doing that, because it may be repeated somewhere else. If we think Russia is following the path to restore Soviet sphere of influence, these kind of interventions may be repeated somewhere else. But from Turkish point of view, and my personal opinion as a long-serving Turkish diplomat, still we don't have enough sensitivity to draw some lessons to guide us for the future abortion of Russian expansion and Russian threats, especially among allies. The frictions are increasing, discriminations are increasing. So to counter Russia by military means is okay, but without alliance cohesion as was in some decades ago, it will not be enough. This is my comment. I agree with the essence of the report, but in the future, of course, according to developments, Turkish delegation may come with a few phrases according to the developments. Thank you very much again, Rapporteur Cedric and Chairman Turner and NATO team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Mr. Turner, is Lara Martinho from Portugal. She would like to take the floor.
First of all, congratulate Cedric for the report that he presented. A very interesting overview of the investments that the Russian military is doing. And I think it would be interesting to see how this pandemic has affected the investment that is being made or will be made by the Russian on the military. So I think it would be interesting in the future to add to this report what will be, or if it will affect, the pandemic will affect these investments. For me, it was also very interesting to see that one of the concerns or the threats that the Russians see on the West is regarding to hybrid warfare. And well, it was interesting because yesterday I was reading news on the New York Times saying that Facebook and Twitter were alert to new disinformation campaigns made by Russian agencies. So we seem to have the same threats in different ways. So it was, I would like to thank you, Cedric, for the report and all the information he gave us. Thank you very much.
And that is the last question that I have currently at this point. Perhaps we could go to some responses.
Cedric?
Ok. Vous m'entendez, c'est bon?
Can you hear me okay? I have a number of answers. Well, first of all, thanks for all the questions and the comments made on the report. The first question was about hybrid threats. Now, it's something which, of course, could be added in a separate section in the report. This has already been referred to back in 2018. At certain points in the report, we talk about this hybrid threat. For example, the poisoning campaigns and other measures used by the Russian administration, more discreetly, as it were, but they're still very efficient. I'm sure we're all aware of these. So we could add something on those lines. Yes, it's not a problem. There was one question from Alex in the UK on targeting. Now, I don't have a great deal of information on that. I think we're all targeted, quite frankly. But what we have here is a report on the modernization of the Russian arsenal and the armed forces. And the question of targeting, or the targets, wasn't really the prime concern in this report. But indeed, it is something which could maybe usefully be thought about by our committee. No doubt the chairman can think about this. As regards the European Defence Fund, now we're all aware that it was the French Senate Defence Committee which spoke on this and wanted the EDF not to lose funding. We're talking about 13 billion euros divided by 2. That was the budget cut which was foreseen, and of course it's very concerning, because if we're going to upgrade and modernise our defence industry, a lot of money is required for R&D, for example. And from that point of view, the European decision, I think, is very regrettable. And I wrote this on a number of occasions, in fact. The question from our friend Idlis in Turkey, well, I'm not sure that we can give a specific answer. I think it was more a comment than a question, asking that a certain number of matters be added to the report. That can be requested formally. Let me take a few seconds to read my notes now, if I might. Oh yes, the Russian intervention in Syria and Ukraine in the last few years. Well, obviously, as the report points out, this was like a laboratory, a proving ground for the Russians to implement military reforms, or at least validate these reforms and test them. So it was like a rehearsal which enabled the Russians both to implement and test, sadly, all sorts of equipment in the real world and at full scale. I think our Turkish colleagues, no doubt, will be able to make a few cogent comments when looking at the report, when we vote on the report in Athens. And our question from our colleague Martino in Portugal, thank you for that question, madam. The question was on COVID and whether this will have an impact on the new budget dynamics in Russia. I think that, like in all countries, sadly, the pandemic must one day have an effect, and a significant effect on budgets. And Russian budget, no doubt, will be affected by, I don't know. What's clear is that between the announced budget for defence and the actual real budget, around 200 million euros, there are big differences and sacrifices we made by Russia in other spheres, no doubt, and this is referred to in some detail in the report. The efforts made to enhance defence will no doubt be to the detriment of education, other public sectors. We need to be clear on that. In the report, as we said yesterday, it might be worthwhile to be able to assess the Russian public policy which is going to be sacrificed to enable the amount of money devoted to defence to be kept at the level announced. The Russian GDP is about the same as Belgium, for example, so it's pretty surprising to see the massive investment which have been made recently to modernise the arsenal. So I think it might be useful, and we can discuss this, to add a small section on what Russia is doing, as you're quite right to point out, to ring-fence the investment. Obviously, we can't reach into the future, but COVID obviously will have an impact on Russia and its Russian military investments. I'm not sure I can say any more now. I think our chairman, Mr. Turner, will no doubt have some comments to make, but thank you very much for all the reactions and feedback. And thank you, Chairman, for the confidence which you've shown in trusting me with this report. I hope we'll be able to meet actually in person one of these days without having to go through VTC. And thanks very much to you, Ethan, also for all the work.
Mr. Turner and Mr. Perrin. We actually have a couple more questioners if you'll take the time to answer those questions. Would that be okay, sir?
Great. Thank you, Cedric. So I saw the additional questions. If we could just have everybody now, if they do have a question, enter their request, and then we'll close out this session. Currently, we're ending it with Utku. And I will recognize Ethan to call on those, and we'll close out this session. Cedric, thank you for taking additional questions.
The first additional questioner is Berat Konkar from Turkey. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to say hello from Ankara to Chairman Turner and to Stefan and Ethan and also our reporter Cedric. I think it's a very important report for our region, for our NATO alliance. It's a very critical time to deal with these issues. I just wanted to bring up the issue of Libya, actually. As we know, now it's a very hot conflict point, and we also see Russian involvement, military involvement in Libya. And also we are seeing some activities from different forces working together with Russian military activities or operators inside Libya. So as far as NATO's southern flank and the security of NATO, how do we assess the involvement of Russia in Libya, and what can we do as far as improving our cooperation, NATO member countries' cooperation in formulating a joint policy regarding the stability and the future of Libya in this respect? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Konkar. Our next questioner is Mr. John Shimkis, representative from the United States of America.
It's great to see everybody, and it's great to be participating in this meeting. I just want to focus briefly on, I think it's paragraph 54. Rightly so, you raised the issue of the satellite and anti-satellite technology being developed. The United States has responded by starting a space force. So it's very important to highlight that, and maybe not for the report and the approval, but for what the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, as you do in the next meetings in the next years, what is going to be the alliance response to what is perceived by the United States as militarization of space? You do highlight the, I think, a 1967 treaty that causes this to be underreported. Well, we don't believe, Russia abides by treaties anyway, and I think the IMF is the perfect example of that. So more to set the table for future debate and discussion from the alliance on how we should respond to the militarization of space. Thank you very much. Great to be with you all.
Thank you very much for that question, Representative Shimkis. And we have a final questioner, also from Turkey, Utku Kakirozer. Mr. Kakirozer, you have the floor, sir.
Hello. Greetings from Turkey. And I would like to thank Senator Cedric for this excellent report. My question, I have two questions actually, two short questions. One is that in this report in part C, I guess, Russia's new invincible weapons, you talk about Russia's new Wonder missiles capable of overwhelming any possible missile defense system. I would like to ask a question. Is our alliance ready to overcome this threat? I mean, with our land-based radars, naval-based radars and missiles, or do we have to modernize our systems immediately, or to what extent? How soon do we have to act? I mean, I'm very much concerned with this invincible weapons and the Russian allegations about the power of these invincible weapons. The second question is that regarding Russia, I mean, we constantly talk about sanctions. Do these sanctions work really? I mean, are we I mean, as NATO or as EU, are we successful? I mean, we're not an EU member, but as Turkey, we're a NATO member. But is the Western world, let's say, is successful in working with these sanctions? Do they work? I mean, looking at this report, especially when I read the first part of your report, I get this feeling that, I mean, whatever we do, I mean, they are successful in modernizing their military to the extent they want or they target. So do the sanctions regime work vis-a-vis Russia? And thank you very much again for this excellent report. Thank you, Senator Turner.
Cedric?
Thanks for these questions. A lot of them, I think, could be responded to by our chairman, Mr. Turner, especially as regards Libya, because NATO has its own stance, and own position, and own actions, of course, in these matters. I have my own personal point of view, but I think it might be, well, I can try to give some answers. As regards the questions asked by Mr. Shimkis from the USA, the perception as regards the militarization of space, well, I think we were clear that this is something which is completely illegal, but our Russian counterparts no doubt will be leveraging the idea of self-defense to justify their actions. Chairman Turner no doubt can give us the stance of Washington on these matters. As regards the, well, whether the alliance can respond to these new invincible weapons, it's not up to us to answer, obviously. We're just quoting President Putin on this. I can't answer, quite frankly. Maybe Mr. Turner can shed some light from that side, from Washington's side. So maybe I should ask him that question, in fact, in turn.
Cedric, thank you. Thank you for your great work on the report and also for responding to the comments that we have today. I know you'll take them into consideration as we move forward into the final report. If anyone has additional comments that have not been expressed during this meeting, please, from this point until we get to our annual meeting, make certain that you provide them to Ethan so that he can discuss them with you and perhaps incorporate them into the report. I'll take Cedric's offer to comment on a few of these things. As Representative Shimkis had said, Space Force is an incredibly important opportunity for, I think, our alliance and for the United States. One aspect of Space Force that you have seen recently is a commitment by General Raymond, who is the head of Space Force, to declassify a great deal of what our adversaries are doing in space. The information that the United States had concerning the operations of Russia and their anti-satellite test could have just been kept classified. So many times we worried before about means, methods, and techniques being disclosed as we look to the disclosure of classified information. But as part of Space Force, the United States actually has a part of its commitment to provide insight into what our adversaries' operations are in space. That will inform us as to what we need to do, both to protect our assets in space, adjust our policies, and to look to what technologies we might need to be able to intervene. I do think that with this new policy and with Space Force's focus, we're going to have a greater understanding of the operations of China and Russia. And as we know, what they're doing today is what they were planning 5 years ago. As we get additional information on what's planning, we can see what the future of their militarization of space is and what response that we need to have. With respect to Putin's statement of super weapons on behalf of Russia, I am very concerned. I know the United States is very concerned as to the deployment of these weapons especially when you combine that with Russia's military doctrine of the use of nuclear weapons to escalate for the purposes of de-escalate. And we, on the West side, we do not look at the use of nuclear weapons at all as a de-escalation. They are only escalatory. But with these additional weapons and that policy, you see the prospects of Russia moving into a first-use policy. And that, of course, has a great deal of concern for us all, which, of course, moves us into the need for greater missile defense abilities. Those missile defense abilities are going to have to counter these new weapons to lessen their first strike capability. If Russia cannot be sure that the use of a weapon will be effective, they'll be less likely to do so. And the whole Western and NATO doctrine with respect to nuclear weapons has been deterrence. We want to deter our opponents. Missile defense helps that deterrence because it goes to whether or not they'll be effective. Because if they go to escalate and they're ineffective in using their weapons, then obviously they're exposed and are subject to a response. These weapons are troubling because today, of course, we don't have that ability. Now with sensors, our space assets, we have the ability to detect, the ability to understand, not necessarily the ability to determine what destination. And that's part of what Russia's, in their design, is seeking, weapons that, upon launch, are undeterminable as to their destination. This report, I think, does a great job of giving people the concern that will then, I think, rise to the call to we do need to take action both on missile defense and our own weapons to counter, so that they also see that they would be subject to a response. Cedric, you've done a great job. Do you have any closing comments for us?
Vous m'entendez? Oui.
Well, I haven't any comments, specific comments, but I think indeed I'll have to take on board what's been said by my colleagues. On the financial aspects, we're going to have to look into things because there are indeed some aspects which could be brought forward. I've asked Ethan to convert rubles to dollars and euros so we can get more of a grip on things. And another issue for me is how a country with a GDP which is more or less like Belgium's can invest so much in defense and offense systems. Here we are talking about 2% of our GDP, and Russia, if you know, is investing, seems to be investing no more than the UK and France, and here we have the results. The results are very impressive. So it would seem that this aspect would need to be further dug into. Okay, well, many thanks. Many thanks, Ethan. Many thanks, Chairman. And I look forward to seeing you all in Athens, I hope.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your report. Ethan, appreciate your work. We will move on then. We will move to our next report, which is our second draft report today. I will be passing the floor to Jean-Charles Lausseneur from France for his report on key challenges to maintaining peace and security in the Western Balkans. I can tell you this issue is, of course, of great interest for me, sitting here broadcasting to you from Dayton, Ohio, the site of the Dayton Peace Accords. I appreciate that we're able to take up this issue and have this discussion because it certainly is an issue that is not resolved. Jean-Charles, thank you for your work. We look forward to hearing your comments.
Vous êtes muté toujours, Jean-Charles.
Can you hear me now? So many thanks, Chairman Turner. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm very glad to be able to present my draft report on behalf of our subcommittee. And of course, it is regrettable that due to circumstances beyond our control, we are on VTC, but I do very much hope that our discussion will be live. And I'd like to thank the Ethan Corbyn and his colleagues and in the interpreters and all the staff for having facilitated this meeting. We're here today
to examine the main challenges for peace and security in the Western Balkans. And of course, this is a major issue for our committee. Dear colleagues, 2020 was full of important developments for peace and security in the Western Balkans and for their integration, Euro-Atlantic integration path. On the 27th of March 2020, North Macedonia became the 30th member of NATO, and last July we were able to see the renewed efforts on behalf of the US and European allies to rekindle a dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. It is very important to normalize relations after 20 months of total deadlock. And this summer in North Macedonia and in Montenegro, a few days ago, we were able to show, there was a real presence to show how the West is present in these countries. But unfortunately, we also have to mark the 25th anniversary of the tragic genocide in Srebrenica. It is the most serious, it's the most tragic genocide where thousands of men, women and children died. The commemoration of these events show us that we must redouble our efforts for peace and security, peace and prosperity in the region, and to avoid and prevent a further ethnic and religious conflict. Nowadays, all former Yugoslav countries are part of or are going to join the Euro-Atlantic community. The European Council is going to open negotiations with Albania and Northern Macedonia. So apart from Serbia, rather, all countries are members of NATO or NATO applicants. Most of former Yugoslav nations are therefore part of the Euro-Atlantic community, and the partnership between the EU and NATO have been very useful. Bosnia-Herzegovina, for instance, with the EU operation taking over from the NATO peacekeeping operation. NATO continues to play a very important role in the stabilization of the Balkans, of the Western Balkans. Allies invest to keep peace and security in the region. And NATO's commitment and engagement has allowed full reconstruction of the security sector in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we have been present in Kosovo, and we have transformed the security sector in many countries in the region. Serbia and NATO have also formed a solid partnership. The EU acquis in the region is also significant. The EU has invested to reshape the state structures, to have more rule of law, to have stronger economies. And this stronger engagement from all parties will support reform in the future before joining the European Union. Now, notable progress has followed the disintegration of Yugoslavia in the 90s, but there are certain worrying issues as regards the economic and political situation. Economic stagnation and state capture have contributed to dismantling the rule of law, and a pork barrel policy is contributing to this, and this is leading to the situation we see in the region. This is, of course, a perfect potting ground for illegal arms trafficking, drugs trafficking, and human trafficking. And this also goes hand in hand with money laundering, and this all this trafficking targets Europe. We can see also extremism importing into the region and exporting from the region, and there are ethnic and religious divides which play very heavily into this particular trend. This has all given rise to very high rates of emigration among youth. And this is, of course, very much to the detriment of those who remain. I was in Serbia, and I've had contacts with different citizens 10 days ago. And I've seen the situation in different areas and in different locations. When I asked people about the main problems, they all told me, youth is leaving. My son, my daughter have left to Europe for the US. We no longer have young people, and we will not have young people in our country. And of course, there are external actors who are playing into this. Russia is trying to sabotage the relations of this country and region with the West, and is trying to get more leverage in Serbia. Russia is also supporting the separatists in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and it is also using its influence as energy supplier. And it's also broadcasting via the local press. The Balkans are also interesting for China, not only from the economic point of view, with its well-known Belt and Road Initiative, but also from a security point of view, by giving priority to investing in ports, in harbors, in roads, in railways. China sees the Western Balkans as a channel for its goods towards Northern Europe. And through the 17+1 cooperation, it's trying to influence all of Central and Eastern Europe. 10 days ago, I was on a motorway in Serbia, and that was built two years ago by Shangun Highways. It is a very modern highway, and there is a surveillance system. There is remote control cameras run by Huawei all along that motorway, facial recognition cameras. So the economic, health and social impact, especially of COVID-19, is very much work underway. But the region is vulnerable, and Russia has stepped in, where underfinancing is rife in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in Kosovo. The political repercussions of the pandemic have shown in Kosovo after the second wave of lockdown, and the government of Prime Minister Albin Kurti was voted out. So a factor of destabilization for the Western Balkans, and a security issue for the Euro-Atlantic community. There is a slowdown in economic and political progress. We are encouraged by the pragmatism by which Kosovo and Serbia are fighting against the coronavirus, nevertheless. And there are gestures which we have seen. The tax on Kosovo on goods coming from Serbia and from Bosnia-Herzegovina has been abolished. And there are now direct links at the initiative of the United States between the two countries or regions, shall we say. So direct talks between Belgrade and Pristina started in July, thanks to the European Union. And France and Germany were engines in this case. This has also allowed for positive developments. Given the major challenges we're seeing, allies have stepped up to the plate. In the summit on the Western Balkans, the European Union spent or pledged more than 3.3 billion euros to support the health sector and reconstruction. Allies have also bilaterally helped. France, for instance, has presented a new strategy for the Western Balkans, targeting economic and social development, justice, defense, development, and the strengthening of the rule of law. The US are also investing in the region on all levels, and the roadmap against small arms and light weapons is backed up by 16 million euros, half of which are contributed by Germany. However, with the pandemic, disinformation campaigns have been rife from Russia and China to mix these messages and to fudge the issue of solidarity from Western countries. So allies must do more. The only way in which the alliance is going to be able to move towards its objective of peace and stability and sustainable peace and stability in the region is a coordinated and unified approach. And it is by bringing together NATO and EU vision that we will, as in the past, be able to find the necessary solutions for this region. The bedrock for allies and NATO must remain the common values which underpin our action. And this must be respected by our partners. The Washington Treaty talks about Euro-Atlantic space promoting democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and free exchange of ideas, of persons, and of goods. We must work towards this. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly has always worked hand in hand with partners in the region. It is essentially to continue down this road, to be able to reinforce and strengthen the economic, social, and security potential of the region, to be able to contribute to a better future for this region. Many thanks.
Jean-Charles, thank you so much. That was a very thoughtful presentation. What a great report. This gives us a real understanding of that this bears our attention. I've always said here locally that, after the Dayton Peace Accords occurred, it's almost as if we all did a check mark and assumed our job was done. And this is an area where it does bear our continued focus, because it could still be an area from which conflict in Europe could arise. And thank you for putting all of those different components together, and a real thoughtful understanding of what we might need to do to try to address it. With that, Ethan, let's look to what comments that we have and questions to Jean-Charles. And we'll take them all in a group again, and then Charles will ask you to respond, and then we'll see if there's a second round.
Yes, sir. The first question is from Azerbaijan, Ziafat Askarov. You have the floor, sir.
Hürmetli məruzəçi, sizi salamlayıram Azərbaycandan.
Thank you very much, dear Chairman, dear Rapporteur. I would like to welcome you from Azerbaijan.
Təəssüf edirəm ki, sizinlə canlı görüşə bilmirik pandemiya yüzündən, amma inanıram ki, Afinada bizim görüşümüz baş tutacaq canlı.
I also regret that, unfortunately, we are not able to have a live discussion, but I do believe that we will be able to meet in Athens.
Hörmətli məruzəçinin məruzəsində mən pandemiya COVID-19-la bağlı bir deməli paragrafa baxdım.
I saw a part dedicated to COVID-19 in the report of the rapporteurs.
Və bununla əlaqədar bəzi fikirlərimi bildirmək istəyib, sonra bir sual vermək istəyirəm.
So I would like to share my certain views regarding this. Later I will ask my question.
Hörmətli həmkarlar, nəzərinizə çatdırmaq istəyirəm ki, bu il may ayının 4-də Qoşulmama Hərəkatının 120 üzvü COVID-19-la bağlı Birləşmiş Millətlər Təşkilatının xüsusi sessiyasının çağırılması barədə Azərbaycanın təşəbbüsünü bəyəndilər və Birləşmiş Millətlər Təşkilatına müraciət elədilər. 120 üzvü.
I would like to mention that in July of this year, 120 members of the non-aligned movement supported the initiative made by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan to conduct the online conference of the non-aligned movement and to conduct this conference.
Və bununla əlaqədar Birləşmiş Millətlər Təşkilatının baş katibi cənab Guterişlə Azərbaycan prezidenti Prezident İlham Əliyevin telefon danışığı olub.
And there was a telephone conversation between the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, and the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres.
Cənab Guterres Azərbaycanın bu təklifini, yəni Birləşmiş Millətlər Təşkilatının Baş Assambleyasının xüsusi sessiyasının çağırılmasına dəstəkləyib.
And Mr. Guterres supported this initiative made by Azerbaijan to have a special session of the United Nations.
Və xüsusi sessiya artıq iyul ayının 10-unda işə başlayıb.
And the special session started already in July.
Və dünyanın 130 ölkəsi Azərbaycanın bu təklifini dəstəkləyir. O cümlədən Avropadan 25 ölkə.
And 130 countries have supported this initiative of Azerbaijan, included 25 European countries.
Və arayış üçün onu da deyim ki, sizə Azərbaycan bu günə qədər Dünya Səhiyyə Təşkilatına $10 milyon ianə ayırıb.
Just for your information, up to date, Azerbaijan has contributed $10 million to the WHO.
Və dünyanın 30-dan çox ölkəsinə maliyyə dəstəyi göstərib.
Also provided financial assistance to more than 30 countries of the world.
Mənim sualım bundan ibarətdir, hörmətli məruzəçi. Necə bilirsiniz, bu məsələ, yəni Birləşmiş Millətlər Təşkilatının xüsusi sessiyasının dövlət və hökumət başçıları səviyyəsində keçirilməsi sizin məruzədə öz əksini tapmalı və NATO'nun Parlament Assambleyası bu məsələyə dəstək verməlidirmi? Versə yaxşı olmazmı yəni?
So my question is following the rapporteur. Do you think that this issue, that UN special session of the UN Parliamentary Assembly should take place, do you think that it can be reflected also in your report and NATO Parliamentary Assembly would support this as well? What do you think? Could you just elaborate on this?
Teşekkür ederim, çok sağ olun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next questioner is from Turkey, Mr. Kamil Aydin.
Yes, hello to everybody. Hi, President Turner and Stefan and Jean, Michel and Ethan. I think and I believe and I wish that you are doing very well against COVID-19. And lots of love from Turkey. And, you know, I would like to start that one of the basic mottos of NATO that I have been fascinated so far since I joined a couple of years ago to NATO PA is one for all for one. This is honestly, you know, very compiling and very integrating type of motto. And I think, I believe it might be very appropriate to consider the Balkans. I am just trying to address to my friend Larsson. You know, I think and I believe that it might be very appropriate to consider the Balkans as a whole, instead of, you know, geographically dividing them or considering them into the south, north, east, west. Otherwise, it might be misconceived maybe that some parts of the Balkans are worth securing, are worth defending, whereas some other parts are not so, you know, or in a very literary, you know, concept, if I may try to define, some parts are equal, but some others are more equal than the others. It's gonna give a kind of harm to the main core of the ally. As a member of the Turkish delegation of NATO PA, this kind of attitude, you know, might weaken the solidarity, unity, and the integrity of the allies. And having said this all, specifically I would like to make a brief, you know, comment on the report. We, of course, to tell the truth, we welcome the draft report on key challenges to maintaining peace and security in the Western Balkans. At the same time, we will have some text proposals to the report, yes. However, a general remark, I would like to stress that the term Western Balkans contradicts with the geographical, as I said a couple of minutes ago, the historical, social, and economic facts of the region. In addition, most of the time, it is also used in a way to exclude rest of the region, which undermines the principles of inclusiveness. We do not need artificial dividing lines, which remind us of very old Cold War era practices. On this occasion, we would like to reiterate our remark that the Balkans is an indivisible region with a common history and shared concerns, whose common challenges are also require some coordinated responses of the countries of the region. I think my friend Larsson might take these, brief comments into consideration and is going to do his best. And I've got some, in the following, I think, stages of the report, I might say some more details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your question. And now we have a question from the European Parliament from Chris Peters. Mr. Peters, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would also like to congratulate the rapporteur with this very important report. I have no important remarks to make, but as head of the delegation from the European Parliament, I know that France and Germany are very, very important. I must underline that. But when you look to the draft, then I think to avoid some reactions from other members of the European Union, I think that we must think about the rephrasement of, and I have three elements, paragraph 18. There you say EU assessment, France. I'm not sure that France is the only country that initiated this EU assessment process, because it is the Council that is responsible for this. I have more or less the same reaction when you look to paragraph 28. Also there, once again, France and Germany are very important, but I think that in the first sentence to emphasize France proposed taking the lead and so on, and also Germany, I think that also other member states of the European Union were involved in that action. And last but not least, when you look to paragraph 81, and that's of course very important to underline that France is reinvesting in the region as well. You mentioned also other allies are doing the same, but I think that also the European Union and a lot of other countries in the European Union do the same. It's a very sensitive element. Once again, France and Germany are very important, but to avoid some reactions from other member states of the European Union, I think these three paragraphs, you must be more careful in the formulation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we have one final question. Oh, we have another question now, sorry. So our penultimate question will be from Ahmet Yildiz from Turkey.
NATO Secretariat Committee Director. Balkans are important for Europe, for NATO, indeed for whole region. Although the attention of the international community is distracted to some other hotspots, we shouldn't lose sight on Balkans. I would make some comments based on my experience as Turkish ambassador to Sarajevo before, and as the NATO contact point ambassador there for 3 years. Thanks to my work there, I have an insight. I know very well what we are doing there as a whole, NATO and EU, because I was also, Turkey is also a member of the Peace Implementation Council there. You know, EU is there, some EU countries are there, United States. It's a unique institution, somehow double head, EU and NATO. And it is authorized to do theoretically everything to protect the state of Bosnia-Herzegovina. I should say that we are doing and we are targeting the same things in the Balkans. In some other parts of the world, we have some other different opinions, different views, some different actions. In the Balkans, the core objective is the Euro-Atlantic integration of the region, the remaining countries there, especially Bosnia-Herzegovina deserves, due to Dayton system, which couldn't be reformed until now, some affirmative action. We, in the Peace Implementation Council there, and in the field, we are countering Russia very well, despite some problems caused by Dayton system. Also in the field, against the separatism by Republika Srpska. In Kosovo also, we are doing a very good job. But unfortunately, as I said yesterday in the other report, this report doesn't reflect this common work. It again prioritizes, privileges the EU contributions and contributions by some special EU members. We will table in written way to the rapporteur some drafts to address this issue. I should give an example. Although Turkey is not a member of the EU, the main contributor to the Althea operation in Bosnia is Turkey. And Turkey is sponsoring many projects for the security, safety, not just Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Albania. So, and also in our drafts there will be an emphasis on the expectations of Albania and Montenegro for EU perspective. Such kind of suggestions to improve the text to reflect the common NATO objectives and common NATO actions better. Thank you very much. I will be happy to hear any response, comment also, either from both from rapporteur and Chairman Turner, if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yildiz. We have a final question from Mr. Utku Kakirozer, also from Turkey. Sir.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Mr. Larsener, for this report. I would also like to follow the comments of both my Turkish colleagues, but also Mr. Chris Peters from the European Parliament regarding paragraph 81. I think singling out national strategies of only selected allies in a NATO document, I mean, can be, cannot really be satisfactory. I mean, unless national strategies of each and every ally are also mentioned, as Mr. Yildiz mentioned. I can underline the fact that only in the process of this COVID struggle against this COVID pandemic, Turkey tried to help 10 Balkan countries, but I'm sure many ally countries have done and still doing their best to contribute the and development of the Balkan region. And I also, I know it would be maybe repetition of the same issue, but I also find it very concerning to divide this geography with like Western Balkans and the others or the rest. I think this is not helpful to our purposes as an alliance, and it's not only for NATO purposes, but also it's not also helpful for the Western values. There are other also maybe in the report it should be stressed while updating the report, maybe we can help, like the Southeast European cooperation process is an important institution in Balkans, and also NATO member Turkey's relations, both historic and geographical relations with Balkans. It's also a member of this geography, part of this geography. I mean, millions of Turkish citizens are coming from Balkan routes, and also many people, also large Turkish communities are living in the same region. So Turkey's relations, Turkey's history with this geography can help the alliance's relations with Balkans in general. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I want to thank all of those who have commented. This is, as I was framing before, a very important discussion for us, because I think it is an area in which there conflict could arise, and that we need to try to address and see what we can do to intervene and to assist. I want to support the rapporteur's report as it stands, and take just a moment before we turn to Jean-Charles for his comments. Since the disintegration of Yugoslavia, NATO has accomplished a great deal. As allies, we have bilateral relationships. We have relationships within NATO. We have, some of you have relationships within the EU, but we come together in many different formats. But when you look to the disintegration of Yugoslavia, NATO has had great accomplishments. I mean, we have today our members of Northern Macedonia, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, Slovenia. Certainly, we do have an understanding of a concept of Western Balkans. When you look at Bosnia, Bosnia received the Membership Action Plan from NATO in 2010, and we have been working diligently on their progressing toward NATO. Kosovo is obviously an area where both NATO and the EU are working, but Serbia has made it clear that they are not interested in progressing at this time toward NATO, but yet they are looking to the EU, which is part of their EU Atlantic integration, and we're certainly all very supportive of that. But in looking at the problems, we can't look at the area as just one, because we've been successful in Macedonia, Croatia, Northern Macedonia, Croatia, Montenegro, Albania, Slovenia, actually joining us, and we look forward to being able to work with Bosnia on the Membership Action Plan and their transition to hopefully be a member. And with that, Jean-Charles, I thank you for your report, and we look forward to your comments.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président Turner. Merci à tous.
Chairman Turner, and thank you one and all for your questions. I'd like to make the most of the occasion to answer them in order, and if Chairman Turner wants to add some final details, because he knows these topics extremely well, I will be happy to cede him the floor. So to answer the first question from our Azeri colleague, there was a lengthy comment first and then a question, comment about an initiative by Azerbaijan carried out with regards to COVID-19 within the UN, with a number of countries mentioned. So I'd like to thank our colleague from Azerbaijan for that clarification, and I'd also like to thank him for having underscored their activity against the pandemic and about the millions that were handed to the WHO. So this report focused on COVID, but not that much. It it talked about directions in different countries. I was able to see myself by going to certain countries, but if you look at a small country like Montenegro, there are about 600,000 inhabitants. 25% of GDP comes from tourism. Tourism today has plummeted to near zero. So I focused more on the economic impact and its security and political repercussions in these countries rather than on all of the international measures carried out in the region. I am always willing, of course, to get suggestions for wording, though. Turning now to the administration and Ethan, maybe that could be the target of a specific report on COVID. That might be an idea for a future report.
Pourquoi pas un rapport en matière de Covid et si vous souhaitez effectivement en dire plus sur l'Azerbaïdjan et la région dans le cadre du Covid, vos
proposals obviously will be welcome along the lines of speaking on a COVID report. As regards the other questions from Aydin, let me start with that. A number of colleagues have shared this question on the geographical limits and specification for the report we've drafted. Well, yes. First of all, the Western Balkans is a term which is used traditionally ex-Yugoslavia, and it covers issues by the UN, by the EU and NATO. If you want to better understand the history and the basic currents in the region, obviously we have to have a wider view. That's true. You can't understand the Western Balkans history without looking at Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, obviously. So it goes without saying that we do need to step back and have a wider view of this. But as regards this report, we're using a classical definition, as it were, and a vision of the way in which these countries have moved and changed in a post-Yugoslav environment. If you want some extra information, some additions on the role of Turkey, for example, in the region, no problem with that. I would go along the same lines. A number of colleagues spoke about what Chris Peters was saying in the European Parliament. Maybe we put too much stress on the German, US, French initiatives compared to other members of the Council or outside the EU, like Turkey. The goal of the exercise, after all, is to realize this is a draft text which can be updated and complemented, but what I wanted to look at was the salient points. But there's no reason why we can't add things, and I'm completely open to your proposals, the report itself being open to change. So thank you, and if you could send in any extra suggestions, please feel free to do so. I think that this echoes the question by Mr. Peters, laying stress on the fact that France and Germany are often quoted in paragraph 18, for example, and they are found in paragraph 81 too. The same holds true. Feel free to send in any wording which you might want included. This can come from any member countries, obviously, and we're more than open to this, to all suggestions. The comment from our Turkish colleague, Mr. Idris, on borders, yes, but also he referred to Turkey's contribution. Obviously, we're not focusing on Althea, Operation Althea. This is a NATO report after all, and Operation Althea is referred to in a couple of paragraphs. If you would like more information to be given on this, and feel free, I mean, we have no problem with that. I would say the same thing from our other Turkish colleague, and welcome, by the way, nice to hear from you, on the actual envelope within which the report is set, the limits. Any remarks you have on paragraph 80, for example, we welcome. Now let's give the floor to Chairman Turner, please.
Jean-Charles, thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughtful responses, and thank you for your making the point that this report remains open. If there is anybody who has any additional concerns or items to bring up, please contact Ethan to bring them to Jean-Charles. I appreciate your very hard and diligent work on this as our rapporteur on this report. We're going to turn now then to other business. We do not have any notice from anyone of other business that needs to come before us. I'll open the floor just for a moment to see if anyone has some, but our expectation is that no one does, no one has extra or additional business items. As we are in this period of time where we're trying to learn how to all operate, I hope you are in contact with Ethan on a regular basis so that he can help guide us all and your delegation, and as you are an active member in this organization, to contribute your thoughts, your interests, and your concerns. The date of our next meeting is currently scheduled for 21st and 22nd in November at the annual session in Athens. Our Greek hosts, the International Secretariat and the Standing Committee, are monitoring the situation closely and will notify delegations should our plans change. I hope and pray that certainly we can all see each other there, whether in person or by video conference. I think you're all aware that the U.S. House has instituted a hybrid system where we have some people who are present and some people who participate by video conference. But I look forward to participating with you in our deliberative processes there. Well, after all this great discussion, this concludes the meeting of the Defense and Security Committee. I would like to thank all our members for participating. It's very important that people participate in both listening and also part of the debate and the dialogue as we move to this virtual world. On behalf of the committee, I would also like to thank our staff, Ethan Corbin, Stefan Sachs, and Jay Lee, for all of your assistance in enabling us to be able to meet in this way. You know, technology is really amazing that we are all over the world, but yet we are all together in this format, and I greatly appreciate that. I appreciate the staff. I look forward to the notes for this meeting so we can all look to what we have accomplished. Look forward to seeing you soon. And with that, our meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Merci Jean-Charles.